I come from TIFAC, which is how it's known. The long name nobody knows. It's a technology think tank. And our task is to look into how things are going to change in the future. And when you look into future, one of the things that you need to do is to look into the past. You need to learn from past to define what's likely to be in the future. And why I'm saying this, because when we talk about village, I don't know how many of you lived in village. I've been in a village for a long time. I used to, from childhood, I have spent a lot of time in village. One of the things that villages in India or probably anywhere else was that they were sustainable because it was a distributed system. A distributed system, like I'll tell you, for example, in our area, we have vegetables in the winter time, and there's more than you can consume. So what you do is that you process that vegetable, you apply certain paste, cut them, put them on the roof. So it actually uses renewable energy. So you did not have to put energy into that. Every family did its own task. So you did food processing to preserve it for the full year. You used renewable energy. Every family did it. So it was a distributed system using renewable energy. Similarly, if you look at the healthcare system, every village had a Ved. They needed to use only local ingredients, by and large, for most of the purposes. Education system was also decentralized. It was a distributed system. Now, as long as it was this system, there was not too much of gap between rural and urban area. What happened was, over last I would say that the Britishers came for about 150 years. If I look at, for example, healthcare system, our traditional system was banned. A raw material was taken out from country to Britain. A factory would manufacture medicine. It was sold back to us at much higher price. This system became centralized system, which meant that when you have a centralized system, the system will flow from Britain to cities of India, and by the time it reaches rural area, there'll be nothing left. So it started to create a gap between urban area and rural area. Okay. So we need to look at this fundamentally. Centralization leads to this gap creation. I didn't hear anybody talking about it. So now if we look at the future technologies that are coming in, is it possible that can we go back to a decentralized system, a distributed system? And that will be key to what I would call a smart village, a distributed system. We have been talking about solar energy. That's again a distributed system that everybody could produce energy as per their need. About 10 years or 15 years back, when I wanted to put a rooftop solar panel to cover my village home, it was going to cost 75,000 rupees. Today, probably cost has come down to 10,000 rupees or 15,000 rupees, and it's likely to come down further. So it becomes affordable. Similarly, I look at healthcare system. It's happening because today we have internet-based systems. Through these smartphones and so on, we're having access to healthcare system in a way that was not possible earlier. And slowly we are getting attachments to these at very low cost so that you can take care of your diagnostics needs. You don't have to go to a super specialist hospital. At least some amount of diagnostics can be done locally. The second thing I wanted to say that, for example, you look at communication system. We had Doordarshan in the beginning when television was there, or landline-based systems. So always difficult to go to rural area because you would have a Doordarshan tower somewhere, and then by the time it reaches village, the signal will be too weak. Then you have the satellite-based systems. It does not matter whether you're in village or you're in city, you have the access to the same signal. Tomorrow you have balloon-based internet services coming in. So again, the same thing. It's going to, so moving from land to a higher system allows the discrimination to go away. So as you go higher up, you see a broader view, that is, there's no distinction between rural and urban divide. So similarly, the third thing, a point was being made just now, is that we need to look at livelihood issues. What are we going to produce? We need to look at the concept of cloud manufacturing. Cloud manufacturing means that the design, let's say that I look at 3D printing, for example, we are looking at this aspect. If I look at 3D printing, again, it's like, I call it Mahatma Gandhi's modern charkha. Okay. Charkha was a distributed system. Everybody used to, keep spinning the wheel and creating threads, and they will convert, they will exchange it for cloth. Okay. Every family this was going on. The hardcore Gandhians even do it today. Just 10 days back, I was in a meeting, and two ladies were spinning charkha all the time, even while they were sitting in the meeting. It was a distributed manufacturing system. 3D printing today has come exactly for the same purpose, distributed manufacturing system where everybody can produce goods. So what is cloud manufacturing? Cloud manufacturing means that I have a web-based system through which I place my order for certain products, it gets distributed, goes to the local cluster, and a person can produce that and send it back. To make it possible, we need to combine two things. We need to combine Digital India Initiative, which is supposed to provide broadband access to villages. So somebody who places an order through the broadband, the design goes there. The design is the difficult part, does not have to be done in villages. The raw material that is needed for this purpose, for 3D printing, you need less number of raw material. Our local post office system, which is down in dumps because I don't remember having used the post office for a long time, and so they say. They can supply the raw material and bring on the finished goods. So they can do the logistics part, and the broadband can provide the connectivity. Similarly, a major thing that is missing out of Indian system is value addition. What I was talking about is that we used to do value addition in our own families by preserving the food for a long time. Today it's possible to do that. I'll just give one example in stop because there's no time to discuss. Otherwise, it's very interesting to talk about it. For example, one sector we have been looking at is guar gum sector. I don't know how many of you heard of guar gum, but people who come from Rajasthan, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Punjab, and Haryana, guar phali is a well-known food item. We were told about 1 year back to look into this, as export of this has tremendous potential. I was surprised. I used to be in Gujarat for a long time. Guar phali we used to eat, not that I particularly liked because I had not grown on that, but everywhere it was there. We found out that from 3,000 crore, its export had jumped to 21,000 crore 2 years back because of shale gas exploration using this particular thing. It became #1 farm export item exceeding rice and cotton. Next it crashed to 14,000 crores. A lot of farmers were affected. Again, a slight improvement is there. Again, now it may be affected because oil prices going down, the shale gas production may reduce, so its use might. When we looked at this sector, one of the things we found out was the value addition in this was zero. 80% raw material India produces. So we control the world production in terms of 80%, but we don't do value addition. So price of the powder is 125 rupees kg in India, it goes out, then chemical processing done 650, 5 times the cost goes up, and all that value addition being done outside. We looked at the patents, 12,000 patents, out of that India's contribution 1%. So what I'm trying to say here is that raw material we are producing, we're just giving it out to others, and